let's realise that we're living in very grave times. Every year, the scientists in the world come together and determine how dangerous the situation is in the world. 2 years ago, they said it was this situation here. This is the time clock, so to speak, the doomsday clock, they call it. And in January each year, they set it up as to show the state of the world at that time. The worst that's ever been was in 1953, and we're at that state now again, and just this year it has been reset at that same position. What do they think it means? Well, this is some of their words. I've just extracted bits of it. They're almost biblical in what it says. What does the doomsday clock represent? The news hints that we are getting closer to Armageddon. A third world war seems plausible, they said a bit later on. Then later they said the doomsday clock is set at least 1 minute closer to midnight, and thus closer to the extinction of mankind, Homo sapiens. That it's the closest it's ever been. We're in a very dangerous situation, they say. But thank goodness for our Bibles, because we know that the Bible tells us that the world is not going to be destroyed. What they are thinking might happen will not happen, because soon the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, as Numbers chapter 14 verse 21 says. So we know we've got a sure hope. But come back to what we've just read about. We read about an image standing up. It actually represented world history down through time, from the times of the Babylonians right through to Rome, the great empires that would rule the world. Now, Daniel's image, therefore, shows to us these world empires. All right? But it says it stands again in the last days. So, it will then stand up again as one confederacy. All right? Now, those empires are gone. So what does it mean? These territories, where those empires used to be, will be united together. Will be united together. It will stand as one confederacy. The territory of the Medo-Persians, the Babylonians, Iran. Medo-Persians, Iraq. Not exactly these areas, but certainly generally there. The Brazen area, the Greek Empire, Turkey, Italy and Europe. So we've got to see these areas united together. Now we can get that information from Daniel 2, but also we won't turn to it, we haven't time, but Ezekiel 38 and other chapters agree with that confederacy of nations. So when that empire stands again united, those territories, which on my PowerPoint is in red, it's in dark colour there, will be united together, all right? But now the burning question is, who leads this confederacy? Now we could turn up Ezekiel 38, and if you wanted to, you can. But most of you will know this, that the leader will be the nation of Russia. How do we know that? Well, here's Ezekiel 38. There it is in the King James Bible. Here's all the modern versions. Now, it says, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Now, in the King James Bible, it says that's just an ordinary noun. But the original showed to us that it is a proper name. And they change it correctly to that. So it is the area of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal. Rosh, where's Rosh? Well, we'll go back to one of the oldest and most reliable lexicons, that's a dictionary of the Hebrew Bible, Gesenius. Everybody agrees that this is the most, advanced, best, reliable lexicon. There it is. You can buy it in modern form today. All right? In that, he's talking about Rosh, and he uses Ezekiel 38, and he says, undoubtedly it's the Russians. So there is Rosh aligned with Meshech and Tubal. So if we come across to here, here's Meshech, and Tubal was over in that area there. There is Siberia. Okay? So that's the modern Russia of today. Now, here's a history book, one of the oldest we've got. And this book, Bocart's Phalag, written in the 1600s, way back in the past, he says Rosh is the most ancient form under which history makes mention of the name of Russia. So the lexicons, the historians agree. Similarly, if we go to the Bible itself, we've got evidence there. We haven't time to look it up, and many of you haven't got Bibles with you at the moment, so it won't matter. But in Ezekiel 38, it speaks of a time when the Jews are in the land, when my people of Israel dwell safely, or confidently as the word means. There it is, verse 14. Skip 15 for a minute. Verse 16 says that they will be invaded. Thou shalt come against my people of Israel, and it shall be in the latter days. So here it is, our time, when Jews are in the land. Has been since 1948. All right? But in the middle of that, it says, and thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts. Here's Rosh, the power led by Gog of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal. It says it will come out of the north parts. RSV, a more modern translation, says the extreme north, uttermost parts of the north. Now I hope that's clear. So let's go from Jerusalem. Let's put an arrow through it and go north. Here we are. North. Well, if you go extreme north, you get in the North Pole. Anywhere from there, you're going south, aren't you? So just before the North Pole, what do you come to? Russia. Russia. The Bible says Russia is the invader of that Middle East. So, Jacenius, Bocart. Now, the logic of the Bible demands that Russia will invade the Middle East. All right? It will be the head of that image that we saw a moment ago, and it will invade the Middle East. Now, come back to Ezekiel 38. Son of man, set thy face against Gog of the land of Magog, well, Rosh, the prince of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal. Now let's look at Gog for a minute. What does Gog mean? Well, Gog's actually a title. Gog just means the one at the top, the supreme leader, the emperor. Well, we don't definitively know who that is, but we make a suggestion to us that, of course, it's the leader of the empire there, that which controls those countries. Well, I suggest to you that this is the one. It may be somebody else. He's getting quite old, but I don't think there's time left for that. So probably this smiling face here that we know so well, there he is, Putin, looks like being the man. All right, the head of Russia. And now come back to our image. Daniel 2 shows Europe, which is our subject this afternoon, must come under Russian control. You see, Russia now is allied to all of those countries, except there. Well, it is allied a bit, we'll talk about that in a minute, but it hasn't controlled all of Europe. That area there must come under Russian control. The 10 toes symbolises the territory that was occupied by the barbarians in the old. The barbarians came in and occupied the 10 territories of Europe in many years ago. That's what is symbolised by the 10 toes. So have a look what Russia did. Come to the time at the end of the Second World War. There was Russia. Here was what we called the Iron Curtain going down through here. And then in the early 1990s, 1989, 1990, oil price reached $12 a barrel. Russia's major export is oil. They were so poverty-stricken they were queuing up for food. They couldn't maintain their soldiers in these countries that occupied at the end of the Second World War, so they pulled out. 1989 to 1991, they pulled out. Russia retreated back into the area of just Russia. All right? But the scriptures tell us that they must retake Europe. We said that, didn't we? So you can see that area of the European area, the iron toes, the clay feet must reform. Russia can't control those areas. Now we have thought that he might invade, but the way things are looking at the moment, it's not going to be that way, and I'll tell you in a minute. It may be that it invades, but let's come back to our image then. I want to go ahead for a second before I come back to Europe. That image says, or the words say, that thou sawest till a stone was cut out without hands. So when it stood, then he says in the next verse, a stone is cut out without hands, which smote the image upon the feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them in pieces together. So what do we expect? A stone is to come out and strike that image, and the image be smashed. So there we are. And the image falls. That confederacy of nations allied to Russia, including Europe, will be broken and destroyed by the stone. Who's the stone? What's the stone? There is no doubt in the Bible what that stone is symbolic of. I could give pages of information on it, but let's cut it down to something simple. In the New Testament, it quotes Psalm 118 verse 24, wow, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. The stone which the builders refuse has become the headstone of the corner. And in each of those quotes, it cites that and refers to Christ and the believers. To Christ and the saints, the believers. So the stone power is the Lord Jesus Christ and those with him. So now we can see the picture. The image stands. Russia takes control of all those areas. The last area it's got to get is Europe. And then after that, Christ will involve himself on the world of affairs. And that image, that confederacy, that alliance will be destroyed. Well, let's have a look at what's going on. We want to have a look at what Russia's up to at the moment. Russia's plans for Europe. Well, this is what it's done. We're going to have a look at this in detail, bit by bit. We're going to follow through 5 different areas he's been into. The Baltic states, Poland, Sweden, Norway, all Europe's oil, and the fear of the attack in Ukraine, and a bit more. So let's go to the Baltic states. Here's the Baltic states. If you can't follow it, there's Sweden up there, there's Britain. Here we are. Here's this area here. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. They were under the Iron Curtain. When Russia retreated and took their soldiers home, there were in those countries quite a few people who were Russians, Russian-speaking people, who'd occupied those countries since the Second World War. They didn't go home. Reason? Because back in Russia they had to queue up for food. They had no problem with food there. So a quarter of the population of those people, over a quarter there, and only 6% there, are Russian-speaking people, ex-Russians. Russia has contacted those people in recent years, last 2 years, said anybody in your family who is 18 to 35 should consider themselves now part of the Russian army, not in uniform, but when we call on them, they are to fight with us. They are to be insurrectionists, people who can stand up and support us, and when we take over your country, we will pay you. For those years you've been faithful to our cause. So they did that. Then the next thing, look at the date, 2 years ago, they moved up against Estonia, 10,000 plus soldiers. Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia were fearful. The leader of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, the defence of Europe, was contacted and said, how do you think about it? He said, look, if Russia wants to attack, he says, we won't be able to do much. They will control that area in 36 to 60 hours. Take no time to take it over. So the people in Latvia, Lithuania panicked. What did they do? They produced a book. That's a smart answer to the fear of Russia, isn't it? This is the book they produced. Okay, in their language. There it is in English. Lithuanian Survival Guide. Another one for Estonia, Latvia and so on. That book was 95 pages long, and it told them what to do when Russia took over. They said, first of all, go out in your garden now, dig a hole and build a building, a room under your lawn so you can roll it back and hide it, and put at least a year's supply of food there and 2 years of medicine. That's what it said. Because when Russia comes, you won't be able to get it. Step one, you must prepare for a full invasion from Russia. Then the leader of Estonia to the north said, look, we are worried. Why can't you come and help us, America? America said, we will. We will. We'll come and help you. America moved in. Britain moved in. 120 soldiers. That's a lot, isn't it? It can defend the Estonia with the 10,000 Russian ones coming, can't it? 120 British soldiers. They'll be pretty good. And they said, we will control the airports. And America will land planes in with weapons within 48 hours. It'll all be okay. The leader of Estonia said, our capital city will fall to Russia in 4 hours. We trade with Russia. There's a freeway between us and Russia. We can't stop them. They'll be right through the city in 4 hours. I was talking to somebody just recently who did a cruise up through this area here. And they called in to Latvia and they said the people were terrified of one thing, the fear of Russia invasion. She said to me, I couldn't avoid it. Everybody was worried. So you see, there was the first threat, 2016. Now, 2017, now 2 years ago, Russia is allowed to make a manoeuvre every 3 years to practice defending itself against Europe. Against Europe. So Russia did. It brought troops into this area here. 2 years ago, it was called the Zapad manoeuvre. Western, that's what it means, Western manoeuvre. They were allowed to bring in 3,000 soldiers. The Economist, which is a very reliable newspaper, sent men into here and observed the trains going through. 44 trainloads of soldiers went in. They said at least 100,000. They reckon 130,000 soldiers went in there. But the Russians said, it's only a manoeuvre, we'll take them away. They did. The Economist watched them take the trains back. They counted the number of soldiers as going through, but they noticed when the train came back to pick the next load up, it was loaded with soldiers. All they did was change the type of soldier. Like that. There's still 130,000 Russian soldiers on the borders of Poland. At the same time as that took place, up in this area which is called Kaliningrad, it's controlled by Russia. That's one area they retained in Europe after they moved out. It's only little, not much bigger, probably about as big as Tasmania, if not that. Kaliningrad, notice to Russia. Into that area, Russia moved naval force, 77 naval ships. Some has gone back, but not many. They're based there in Kaliningrad. Huge numbers. And they brought in 2,000 soldiers to face those 130 British ones. So you can see the problem. The leader of Lithuania, said this: Russia is a threat to all of Europe. You must understand that. It's not only our danger, it's yours. All of Europe. So we can see the situation there. So then American moved troops into Poland. Like Britain did, they moved in a huge number. Look, 1,100. Facing the Russian, 130,000. Staggering. So here we can see the scene there. And now this area, 2017, was packed with soldiers. All right? Let's move on. Come to last year. Here's what the ABC says. Russia is rehearsing for a global war and giving an early warning to the West. Not verbally, by what they're doing. They did the largest manoeuvre ever seen by Russia. They manoeuvred 300,000 soldiers up near the Arctic area, close to Norway. We'll see about that in a second. Brought in 1,000 aircraft. Massive manoeuvre. Here in this area, there's Norway. And it appears that they were threatening Norway. So into that area there they came. Their soldiers were in and out this area here. So what did NATO do about it? NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, has 53,000 standing soldiers at any moment. They shifted up into that area, somewhere between 40 to 50,000 of their soldiers, leaving 3,000 holding the rest of Europe. But at the same time, the Russians switched off the GPS. How they did it, we don't know. But the GPS signals were jammed for Norway, Finland. They're totally cut off. And here's one of the ships. A Norwegian frigate slammed into an oil tanker. See, it's gone right up over the side of it. Because it didn't know it was there, which it would have known if the GPS was working. So into that area, Russia moved troops up into that area there. Sweden, they were worried. They called up 22,000 out of jobs to increase the size of their army because they feared this could happen to them. But it was primarily Norway Russia was intimidating. They moved into here. One paper said 40,000. Later they said 50,000. Were moved into that area to protect Norway. Here's a little bit of a picture of it. Here's one of the British headlines at that same time, October 2013. World War III fears. 50,000 NATO troops in Norway for huge show of force against Russia. They were worried. Here's some of the troops moved up into that area. So now we can see not only those two areas, now this area was being threatened. But then Russia seemed to change directions a little, possibly. Iran threatened to close the Persian Gulf. Remember, Iran is a friend of Russia. And stop oil supplies to Europe and Australia, I might add. At the time when this happened, I'll tell you in a minute, Australia looked like it might get cut off from oil. Stop oil supplies to Europe. And Russia exploited that threat, that danger. Now, what's going on? Come back now, let's look at Iran. Iran for many years has been building missiles and trying to build atom bombs. Why? Primarily so we can destroy Israel. Okay, that's a dated article, 2012. All that I've had so far is very recent stuff. But they have got ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, that can come in at 14,000 kph out of orbit. And they claim they'll be able to wipe out Israel in 12 minutes. It's achievable. But America said, you stop building atom bombs or else. And Iran's response was, we'll close the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea. And if that happens, out of the Persian Gulf comes 40% of all oil tankers. We get 82% of our oil from there. So around about November last year, the Australian government came out, which I've got at home from one of the papers, an article saying we have 44 days reserves in Australia, 32 on the ground, and we have oil tankers at sea, which will bring it up to 44. We were going to fly over to New Zealand. So I look at my ticket. We left on that day. We came back on that day. Well, I thought, yeah, we'll get home. We'll have enough petrol to get through. But anyhow, that has slowed down at the moment. But it's not very surprising for us as Christadelphians, because the threat of closing the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea has been written in many of our articles, in Exposition of Daniel, Eureka, Herald. All of the key writings that we've had have suggested that the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea will be closed by allies of Russia. And indeed, That's exactly what took place, or exactly what they're threatening. So let's have a look at what could happen. America said, on November the 2nd, we're going to close, we're not going to buy any more oil from you unless you stop building nuclear weapons. Iran didn't. It kept building them. So America said, we will boycott you. And we will boycott any other country who buys from you. So Iran responded and bought in 6,000 sea mines, not old-looking ones like that, but they look like a sea mine. That's why I chose that in the pictures. But they brought in 6,000 sea mines to close this waterway and this waterway. So close off the oil. Then Russia acted another way. Russia has pipelines, well, Europe, the Kuwait and Iraq has pipelines travelling oil through Syria, which is under Russian control at the moment. So Russia then brought into that area 33 naval vessels and said, we will stop all oil flowing from there when we are ready. No ship can go into Syria or out without our permission. That was late November. Then, so they can cut the oil coming out from here. Then Russia, 2 years ago, has moved into Libya. Last year they moved into Libya S-300 missiles, which can take out oil tankers. 150,000 barrels goes into Europe. I think it's every day from Libya. Russia now can stop that. The last source of oil for Russia, for Europe, after the Persian Gulf and through here and here, is there, Norway. Norway controls half the North Sea. Britain gets half the North Sea oil, Norway gets the other half, and it exports that oil to Europe. Hence, Russia made its big move up here to threaten Norway. In other words, if we want to, we can move in there too, if you don't do what we want. So the headlines in Britain came out this. October, late October, World War III fears as NATO sends 50,000 troops against Russia. The gravity of that is huge. We're not seeing that in our papers. We don't want to hear about it anyhow. We live in a fool's paradise. But the gravity of it's huge. So come back to our map. So all of that has happened. And now, they could cut off all Europe's oil supplies quite quickly, quite easily. But Russia hasn't stopped there. Russia has moved into the Ukraine, or against Ukraine. You may remember 2 years ago they took control of Crimea, this area here, and they built this bridge. Ukraine intends to supply itself with equipment and such like, normal trading on the seas. Ships go from there to there, from Ukraine to Ukraine. Quite legal. But Russia then put a ship through that bridge that is over there and stopped the flow of all equipment going in there. That's there now. Russia took that ship that I pointed out there, took it captive, and put the people on board in prison. They've done nothing wrong. But they're making a clear statement that Ukraine, watch it. We're ready to move. Then they moved, look at the date, 22nd of November, only about 2 months ago. They moved then into the area of Crimea, 80,000 more troops, 1,400 artillery pieces, 900 tanks, 2,300 armoured combat vehicles. What's going on? This is huge. And that's Radio Free Europe. It's quite a good reporter, quite a reliable reporter. And now here's the President of Ukraine speaking. And what does he say? Putin is threatening NATO's eastern borders, behind us. And remember what's happened to us over the last couple of years, since 2016, when the attacks have happened, 2014, since the attacks have happened, we've lost 11,000 dead in fightings with Russia. 1.5 million of our people have lost their homes in the fighting. It's terrible. The whole system of the security, European security, is threatened. It's being threatened by what's going on. Look at the gravity of what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. Extremely serious. Now, of course, I'm moving quickly. I have to because I haven't got the time to do otherwise. Quite a lot of material to look at. So Russia has done those things, but now is threatening Ukraine. But it isn't stopping there. Coming across to another way of looking at things. Britain will break away from Europe. 2016 they voted they would do so. We know that's going to happen because the Bible says that. The merchants at Tarshish, Britain, will, with all the young lions, the Commonwealth nations thereof, shall say unto thee, art thou come to take a spoil, to take a great spoil? Now, the bits in brackets are my comments on that, and I can prove that, and they're well-established beliefs by Bible students down through time. So indeed we expect Britain to break away from the European area. This is going on right now. It's not coming to an easy solution. There's Theresa trying desperately to leave Europe on nice terms. But it's the biggest political and economic move since World War II for Britain. Here's a little cartoon that really captures the spirit of what's going on. Here's the EU. See the flag? Here's Mrs. Merkel up in the Conning Tower, you know, screaming out. Here's economic failure coming. Depression is looking like coming into parts of Europe right now. Here's Greece vomiting over the side. Here's Spain trying to walk the gangplank. And there's a hole here and they're going over the cliff. Europe is in a real mess. Fear from Russia. Economic problems. They're not united. They're not working together. And so here's Britain. There it is, sailing off into the sunset. And indeed, Britain knows it's going to be cut off if it's not careful from Europe. Russia last year, early last year, brought naval vessels, there's a Russian naval vessel, into British waters. They kept it up for months and they logged what they were doing. They were following down the cyber cables coming into Britain and going from Britain to America. And they tried to work out what they were doing. And they had submarines on board, 3-man submarines. They were dropping it down on the cyber cables. Theresa sent the Navy out twice to drive the Russian Navy out. But they came back till the job was done. They believed that the Russians had put on the cyber cables going into Britain explosives that can be remotely controlled, blowing them up in the mud. Through those cyber cables comes 97% of all the data going into Britain or out of Britain. So says The Guardian, a very reliable commentator. Within a month of that being completed by Russia, Russia launched satellites with lasers on board which will burn out the repeater satellites, the last 3%. Russia can cut totally Britain away from Europe and from America and its communications like that. There's the gravity of the scene. And the military in Britain appreciate that. They know that. But in Europe, things are also in chaos. You've probably heard of these yellow shirts. People protesting against the governments in Europe, hitting the streets in huge numbers. There we are in France, complaining about Mr. Macron leading France. Here there are huge numbers of them. But it's not stopped there. It's now spread from Belgium to Croatia to Ireland to Netherlands to Holland, in other words. Macron and the French centralists don't have the answers to what these yellow garment people are protesting against. We won't have time to go into that in any detail. But come back to our picture. So Britain is moving away. And these yellow shirts are destabilising the economies and the governments of those countries at the same time. So we can see the gravity of what's taking place right throughout Europe at the moment. So look at the situation. Okay? Situation by situation as it's going through. Now, I want to move across to the Russia's weaponry. Have a look at what's going on there. Come back to Kaliningrad, where we talked about before. Remember where those 70-odd ships came a couple of years ago? All right? So here in Kaliningrad, look what the headlines are saying. Tensions rise surrounding Russian enclave of Kaliningrad. The build-up of military forces. What sort of forces? Predominantly these. Missiles. Here's Kaliningrad. Some only fire that far, some that far, some that far. Let's have a little look at some of these baby missiles Putin has put in there. Here's one of them you might like to look at. This one is a ICBM, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. It can go into orbit. It has got 12 warheads on it. Boy, this is worth thinking about. This is horrific. 12 warheads. Each warhead is a hydrogen bomb. Now, during the Second World War, they dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombs. A hydrogen bomb is over 3,000 times bigger than a bomb. Hiroshima was knocked out. If they dropped one on Adelaide, you'd be probably all right. An A bomb, where I go to, my meeting in Enfield would probably get bowled over. All right? That's just down the road about 15 minutes drive. It would be destroyed. You'd be okay, just get burnt. But if they dropped an A bomb on here, Victor Harbour would be damaged. Think of that. They have got 12 on board, and this friendly chap contacted Macron of France and said, if we drop one of those on France, we'll destroy the whole of France. He contacted the Americans, and he said to the Americans, if we drop one on America, we'll take out the whole of Mexico. One bomb. One bomb. So we can see the gravity of what's taking place. It's growing every minute. Russia gave a little Christmas present. Look at the date. They made an announcement on Christmas Day last year that they've got these nice little missiles that they enter the atmosphere at 20 times the speed of sound. You cannot hit it with a missile. You cannot defend yourself, Europe. You'll just be wiped out. Further than that, December last year, not far away, they also said we've got a huge number of extra missiles with a range of 500 to 5,000 kilometres. And one of the key men over in America, Pompeo, gives Russia an ultimatum and said, you've got to get rid of these missiles. You're breaking the contract that we signed in 1980 that you wouldn't have this huge number of missiles. We'll give you 60 days to stop it, to get your missiles out of Europe. 60 days, get busy. They did absolutely nothing. So America said, we're pulling out of the UNF, the International Nuclear Forces Treaty. We're pulling out. We're not going to have anything more to do with it because we know you're breaking it. We know you're breaking it. The situation is extremely serious. So here's the scene now. There's Europe. This picture of Mrs. Merkel. And here is USA. It's got some missiles in Europe and in America. But over here, Russia's got huge numbers. The US to withdraw from the Nuclear Controls Treaty with Russia, raising fears of an arms race. Date? February the 1st. They pulled out. They could see they could never win that race. Russia had already broken it thousands of times. And they have thousands more missiles than America's got there in the middle of Europe. Okay? So the situation is really, really looking serious. Now, Trump has reported saying we'll withdraw from NATO because we can't help them. We can't save Europe. It's such a dangerous situation. We'll withdraw. So the situation is looking very dangerous. Look at the date this year, January the 15th. And so there we are. Trump is worried. He can see he's limited. They haven't got enough equipment there. They can't defend Europe. And so, January the 15th, Trump has reportedly discussed withdrawing from NATO. And that would be lovely for Russia, because there would be nothing in its way from taking Europe. So here's Europe now. And now, USA talks of leaving INF. It has. But it's talking now about leaving the NATO group. So what's Europe doing about it? Well, now at last they're going to start to defend themselves. They're trying now, belatedly. America asked them to do it. They didn't. Now they're saying, belated, yeah, we're forming an army. But a lot of them are now talking about capitulating to Europe. The feet aligning with Russia, the head. So, Germany quietly working to unite the European militaries. Look at the date. Late last year. 25 countries are going to them. And they're trying to say, let's form a full-fledged military alliance. But remember, they never even spent 2% on military. They're trying to get them together now to defend against mighty Russia, who's been spending boggins for many, many years. And the problem also is, then they've got to all agree if they're going to fight. European army will be a total disaster because they couldn't agree. Why couldn't they agree? If Russia's threatening them, why couldn't they agree? Well, here's the new leader of Italy. Came into power 9 months ago. All right? What did he do? As soon as he came to power, he contacted Mr. Putin. Said, like to be friends with you. Like to be friends with you. Like to be buddies. Okay? Rise of a far right in Italy and Austria gives Putin some friends in the West. He's advocating opening up towards Russia. He can see the writing on the wall. America can't defend them. They've lost the race. Russia's got so much into the European area, it's almost over. So he's saying, look, and even Mrs. Merkel, she's teaming up somewhat with Putin. She can see the writing on the wall. Germany and Russia are getting closer, and here's why. The situation is it's just gone too far. And nobody's done anything early enough. And Russia's seeing that they're going to act soon. 6 months ago, they began withdrawing all their money from the International Monetary Fund. They drew it out. Boom. So they're now independent. They're setting up a computer system only for Russia. They can cut off the rest of the world. They're building up their army in huge numbers. Told you Europe's got, standing army about 53,000. Russia's got standing army of 1 million. And Europe could call up quite a few many soldiers too. But look what Russia can call up. She's got 3 million trained soldiers. Now I want to go aside for a minute. I want to go back in history. I want to go back to these days. I guess you'll recognise this gentleman. I don't know if I should use that word. And this man. Second World War. Europe faced the threat of invasion. Look at what took place. Czechoslovakia, Russia, Germany came to the borders of Czechoslovakia, they gave up. Germany came to the borders of Austria, they just gave up. Didn't fight, didn't fire a shot. They came to Poland, they brought out their chariots, not their chariots, but their cavalry. And Germany poured in their tanks, and in 10 days it was all over. Massacre. Denmark, it lasted 6 hours. Then Norway, 5 weeks. Then Belgium, Netherlands and France fell in 6 weeks. Everybody gave up in the front of tanks. Nowadays it's atom bombs and nuclear weapons. All right? Let's stick with the Second World War for a moment. It's quite interesting. So what do they do over in Britain? They changed Prime Minister. At that time when Germany was invading France, they got this man to make him Prime Minister. He was in power for 3 weeks and he got together the inner cabinet. He got them together and he said, what will we do? They couldn't agree. Most wanted to give up to Germany. He wouldn't have anything to do with it. It was a stalemate, he said. So he said, that he get for the first time on a train to Parliament. See, he was pretty prominent. He always went by chauffeur. And this time he went by train to Parliament, so that he could talk to the humble people. And he went along the train asking them. It's well documented. Interestingly, Boris Johnson wrote a bit about it. Anyhow, he went along the train asking everybody, would they fight? And they said, yes, yes, yes. So he then went to the Parliament again, and he said, I am convinced that every one of you would rise up and tear me down from my place if I were, for one moment, to contemplate Parliament and surrender. And Parliament stood and cheered him. They supported him. And so he knew that he had the day. He carried the day. And Britain fought. But it was that close. Now, look at Europe today. They haven't got 2% of their funds into weaponry. Where are they currently at the moment? Nowhere. They haven't got a show. And they're trying to face Russia with all its nuclear weapons. What a terrible situation it is. And they can see the writing on the wall. Look at this writing that's on the wall. Look at the situation here. There we are, only last year. Over the UN observer notice, they all came together. Here's Mr. Putin. Rosh. The Bible, Mago, Germany. Turkey, Tagama, Goma, France. Friends. They can see the writing on the wall. They may not be friends, but they want to be friends with Russia for the time being at least, till they can work out what to do. And Russia has grand designs on the European domination, Mike Pompeo says, the American leader. ABC reported that. Russia has grand designs for dominating Europe. Look at the date, 14th of February, only a few days ago. And here now is the leader of France. He's changed sides in what he's saying. France calls on the EU to not rely on USA defence, reach out for Russia. They can see they can't do anything. French President Emmanuel Macron is calling on the European Union to boost military cooperation and stop relying on the United States for defence while reaching out to Russia. Change sides. He can see the writing on the wall. And that's what the scripture says is going to happen. Whether it happens this year or next year or what, we don't know, but it looks like it's soon. So let's come back to where we left off. Ezekiel 38 describes a massive invasion of the land of Israel after Europe is allied to Russia. So there's our image. Remember that? Thou sawest till a stone was cut out from without hands. And it smit that image on the feet, didn't it? And what was the consequence? That it was broken. It was smashed through the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. But the first thing is, the whole image must stand. We are seeing at this moment that any moment the image could stand. Europe could ally with Russia, and effectively every nation represented in that will be in place. Time has passed. We know what Christ is going to do. When Russia enters also into the glorious land, Russia united with Europe and many other countries, and many countries shall be overthrown. Russia will move into that area. Already Russia is in Syria. It's on the borders of Russia, on the borders of Israel. But they will move into there with the alliance with Iran and Europe, Greece and such like. They will move into the area of the Middle East, and it will be opposed by the British powers, which in the Bible are called the Tartan powers. But at that critical moment when it's world war, major conflict taking place, what does the scripture say will happen? This. I will gather all nations against Jerusalem for battle. That's what we saw a few seconds ago. All nations coming to Jerusalem for battle. And his, Christ's feet, shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives. Christ returns. In fact, he will have returned earlier than that to gather the believers. And it goes on. which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof. Great earthquake. So Christ returns with the believers involved. And what is he going to do? He's going to set up his kingdom on this earth. What's that kingdom involve? Here it is. We haven't time to look at it in detail because our time's really gone. But he will rule as a just king. You have a look at the rulership today. There's a lot that isn't. A benevolent world government will be set up. All right? True justice will rule on this earth. Worldwide peace will at last be there. No longer India and Pakistan fighting like they are at the moment, or anything like that. One worldwide language, one worldwide religion. All will worship the one true God. And then indeed, there will be wonderful security and plenty of food for everybody. All right? So we can see the results of that will be huge and wonderful. Well, finally, here is Christ, or the words related to Christ when he ascended to heaven. What did it say? And he said unto them, go you into all the world. This is the angel that stood by Christ when he went up into heaven. He said unto them, go you into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be condemned. Where do we stand? Let's look at that just for a second. 3 essential steps for salvation. Believe the gospel. Do you do that? It's the good news found in the Bible. And then, having done that, we need to be baptized. Baptized, says the angel, speaking on Christ's behalf. Total baptism into water. In our commitment to following that way that is right and true. And then, if we continue faithfully until he returns, and it looks like that's not far away, we shall be saved. The answer's straightforward, isn't it? And it's beautiful. But we're looking at the potential of something very big happening in the very near future. And it seems to have been escalating in the last few weeks. Okay, it could all slow down. I know that. But at the moment, it looks like it isn't. And if it isn't, Christ's return could be very, very soon. Russia could control Europe, and the image could stand, and then the stone power could be formed, which will ultimately destroy that alliance that we spoke about. Right, thank you.